All right, so 6 years ago, I didn't know jack shit about email marketing. Obviously I knew what an email was, but I didn't know anything about like flows, campaigns, segmentation and all that. At the time I was actually working Instacart for $12 an hour, right? And at the same time, I was doing that during the day, and at night I was reaching out to brands trying to get this agency started. I had zero experience, but for some reason, this one brand took a chance on me and allowed me to run their email marketing channel. I almost got fired within 2 months because obviously I had no idea what I was doing. But despite that rough start and a lot of other things that went poorly for me, fast forward 6 years and now I've generated over $87 million in email sales for D2C brands. And how I did it was by obsessively and autistically learning what works the best. Now, I'm not telling you all this to flex, obviously, but I'm just telling you this because if you're a founder running a real D2C brand and email is one of those channels that you struggle to figure out, you need to know that it's learnable and actually quite simple once you know the optimal system and strategy. But before I get into that, let me show you how I went from almost getting fired by my first client to running email for brands doing multiple millions per month. My name is Max Alexander, and this is how I learned email marketing the hard way. So let's get started. So when I first signed up with this client, they're actually in the supplement space. I was happy, obviously, because I got my first client, but then I also freaked out because I didn't know shit. So what I did is I copy pasted templates from YouTube tutorials, but I didn't know all the nuances. So the first mistake I made was sending a campaign to their entire list with no segmentation. Their open rates tanked, deliverability just went to shit, and I almost got fired. And then in my retardation, somebody told me that the solution was to just send more campaigns. So what I started doing was I just started blasting their full email list 5 times a week. Open rates collapsed, unsubscribe rate obviously spiked massively, revenue barely moved, and eventually almost got fired again. Super embarrassing. And then I ended up realizing that volume wasn't the problem, but my overall strategy was gonna need more work. And this sort of started the journey of figuring out everything from scratch, which was about sort of 2 years of trial and error. Essentially what I was doing was I was spending each night watching Klaviyo tutorials. I watched basically everything on YouTube, bought courses from the top people in the space, and those were decent. Got me better than beginner level, but it still didn't include all the nuances that you need to know to drive actual results. And overall what I realized is that nobody's really teaching a real strategy or really giving the real sauce of what actually drives a shit ton of revenue for these top brands. And a lot of what's out there in the courses in YouTube is mostly just surface level tactics and templates, like, oh, here's how to set up an abandoned cart flow. So not the most valuable information. And then at one point, the client asked me to explain why the welcome email was being sent to non-openers or it was being resent. My response was like, oh, that's just the industry standard. And then I remember they were like, well, it's nuking our deliverability. Like the open rate is like 5% and it's generating no sales. And I remember just being on that call. I didn't actually know what I was doing. No, I was just copying that course. So it was super awkward. I looked like a retard. Look, if you're watching this and you're stuck in the same place that I was trying to figure out email marketing in Klaviyo, I actually built an email marketing starter kit. It has the exact frameworks and breakdowns that I wish that I had when I was first starting out. And the best part is that it is completely free. So check out the description for the link, and let's get back to the story. Eventually the shift came when I realized that templates don't really work. One size fits all strategy doesn't really work because every brand is different. So I started A/B testing everything. Subject lines, send times, conditional splits. I tracked which segments were actually converting and not just, people who open it but never convert. And importantly, I learned how to structure the flows to generate maximum revenue without just spamming discounts like the vast majority of brands do. And I remember the first real win that I had was when I rebuilt this supplement brand's welcome flow from scratch. I took it from 2 emails to 5 emails. I removed the discount, which actually increased the conversion rate because I added the brand story, social proof, unique selling points, and a bunch of other things. And the revenue per recipient went from 80 cents to $2, basically almost doubled that. And then I remember showing the before and after to the client, and they were shocked. They're like, this is crazy. Everybody's buying at full price and you've like doubled sales. This was around when I realized that most brands actually ignore the flows and focus mostly on campaigns. So having, rebuilt the abandoned cart, browse abandonment, and post-purchase flows, this one brand's email revenue went from 60K per month to 700K per month just by fixing their flows. And this is like a multi-8-figure brand. And, it's really fascinating how many of these really large and successful brands are leaving so much on the table because they don't understand flow flow strategy at all. After this point, obviously got some good case studies, word spread, more brands wanted help. I was just getting a ton of clients on referral, and I started to realize that every brand has pretty much the same problem: broken flows and weak copy and zero segmentation, generally speaking. So I essentially became the guy who fixes, the mess left over by other agencies. By the way, if you want to see the exact flow strategy that I use to scale email revenue for D2C brands, I put together a full masterclass document where I break down the full system. Obviously, this isn't some generic PDF or whatever. This is the real strategy that we use in our agency to generate millions of dollars for our clients. All right, so it goes over flows, segmentation, attribution, basically everything regarding Klaviyo email marketing. So if you're serious about fixing your email channel, this is the best place to start. Link is in the description of this video, so check it out. So first big lesson that I learned is that most brands are leaving 20 to 30% of revenue on the table. So the average D2C brand, their email channels doing anywhere from 15 to 20% of revenue, and they're sort of stuck there. Optimized brands are anywhere from 30 to 40% of their store revenue coming from email. And the lowest hanging fruit generally is going to be the flows, not campaigns. Most of these brands are going to have 2 email welcome flows and 1 email in their abandoned carts. This is where most of the money is. Obviously, these are the 2 highest converting flows and barely sending out like 1 or 2 emails on. And second biggest thing that I learned is that segmentation is a multiplier that barely anybody talks about. Most brands are emailing their entire list, sort of the same content. They sort of just batch blast their campaigns to their entire list, and their engaged subscribers, lapsed customers, VIPs, like there's no real strategy. They all kind of just receive the same stuff every time. I can tell you that once you segment properly, revenue per campaign can double or even triple. Like it makes that big of a difference. And buyers need different messaging than non-buyers, obviously, because they're at 2 completely different stages in their customer journey. And more money isn't in necessarily sending more emails, it's more about sending the right email to the right segment. The third insight that I learned is you don't necessarily need more campaigns, you need better flows. So most brands are already sending, 3 to 4 campaigns per week, and they're so focused on, how do I consistently send more to my entire list, or send to different segments, etc. But their welcome flow is like 2 emails long, their abandoned cart. So they're spending all their time and effort producing more campaigns, but their flows are, non-existent. And obviously that's backwards. So first you want to fix your flows, and then you can address and optimize the campaign. So the main insight here is stop just turbo blasting campaigns and start building optimized systems, aka the flows, and getting those optimized first. And sort of the meta lesson that I learned from all this is that the best way to look at the email channel is as an overall system. It's not necessarily about sending more emails, which most brands are already doing. It's about building a retention system that works while you sleep and generates revenue for you, basically on autopilot, because at the end of the day, flow emails are tailored to everybody who receives them. Those are the most personalized emails. Those get the highest ROI. So the order of importance of the flows in terms of optimizing them is welcome flow, abandoned cart / abandoned checkout, post-purchase, replenishment reminder, and win back. So after you optimize all of your flows, then you want to focus on optimizing your campaign strategy, specifically with the segmentation and making sure that each segment is receiving tailored email to them. So for instance, your non-purchasers, your lapsed customers / win-back segment, your VIPs. So you get all of those right, and then email becomes your most profitable channel, sort of as a byproduct. All right, so that's my story of how I went from knowing literally 0 about email to now generating over $87 million in email revenue for D2C brands. And really, it all comes from that one decision to just stop copying all the email gurus who are out there and to actually start testing out different things, figuring out what actually works, and build the system on your own. So if you're a D2C brand already doing over 50K a month and you want help with fixing your email channel, we actually do free Klaviyo audits, and we actually take on a few clients every month at my agency, Skyro Digital. And as part of that, we guarantee a minimum 50K per month revenue increase within 45 days, or you don't pay. And we actually prove it to you with before and after screenshots of your account. So links in the description for that. Book a call in, let's see if we're a good fit. And if you're not ready for that just yet, you can grab the email marketing starter kit PDF, which is also linked in the description.